Hey guys, Ralf Brenninek here from pixelasm.com with a preset I built for Cinema 4D called TextSphere, by which you can easily put text on and into spheres, plus just in case you want to use OTFs, customized fonts, or even logos, you can easily use splines as well. As freelance interface and motion designer, I mainly work for advertising agencies. So last year I did some of the motion graphics for a concert tour in Scandinavia, for which I had to put the artist's lineup onto spheres. In order to streamline that process, I built an Espresso setup, which I then extended and refined for this release. After installing the TextSphere lib4d file to your Cinema 4D presets folder, you can find the presets in your content browser over here. First off, you will notice that it consists of two presets: TinSphere for text in a sphere and TonSphere obviously for text on a sphere. Because I suggest you're more likely to use TonSphere and because this is the more complex one, I will start with that preset, but afterwards I will also go through the few settings by which TinSphere differs. Okay then, let's just bring in the TonSphere preset from the content browser into the sample scene with a double click. And first off, you'll see 5 user data groups providing access to the most commonly used settings of each component, starting with the sphere itself. Here you can change the overall size and the amount of segments. Although you might want to keep the amount of segments low for faster workflow and dynamics processing, it will still render perfect by default, as you can see here. But if you are heading for a discosphere-like look, you can still deactivate this. And then you'll see all the edges of the sphere. Next is the text group, where you can change the text, its font, alignment and size, as well as letter spacing and row spacing and naming I find more intuitive than vertical and horizontal spacing. Some of you might have experienced the problem that Cinema 4D can't use OTFs, so you might want to export your OTF type via Illustrator as vectors and drag it here. But because you can use any spline, you can also use logos. As a side note, splines will automatically override the type in the standard text field. But if you want to go back to that, you can simply clear the spline here. Below config, you can find settings which apply for the text object as well as the spline, like depth, formerly known as thickness, and materials. In the Text Advanced group, you can go for more in-depth changes, like applying different materials to the caps and roundings. You can also change the amount of steps for the caps to save some memory, or create other looks, for example by cranking up the end cap fillet size, like so. The cap grid can refine the shape's cap so that it sticks better to the roundness of the sphere and looks more even when viewed close up. And as you might know, these 3 options from the extrude knob, I'm going to skip these. The last section of this group contains offsets, which might also be interesting for when you are using dynamics and want to have the type facing a certain direction, which sometimes is a tedious task to do when using dynamics. Depending on the size and position of your type, changing the settings of the bends is useful too. Next comes the text on backside group, which by default should be offline. If switched on, you can also choose the direction which the type on the back should face, which is important depending on the axes you are turning the sphere around. But most important is that you can either use the same text or spline on the back as on the front, or you can choose to use a completely different text or spline. Besides that, the text on backside options are the same as the ones on the front. The next group contains the dynamic settings with the most commonly, or at least by me most commonly used settings. I guess most of you will already know what these are about, so I'll just skip them. One thing you should keep in mind though is that the text on either the front or the back influences the center of mass. Although the sphere behaves realistically in that manner, in some cases you still might want to change the center to your liking. Especially when you only got type on one side of the sphere, it tends to tip over in a physical correct way. Something you can work around here. At last you can find the compositing group. Here you can specify different object buffer IDs for the sphere and the texts, something which comes in handy for when you are doing effects in post like glows or color correction. All that's left to do in the render settings is to set up the corresponding object buffers in the multipasses. Well then, that's all about the TextSphere preset, so let's have a quick look at the TextSphere or TextSphere preset and its minor difference to TextSphere. The first difference is that you can't find a render perfect switch here because it does not seem to work with booled objects. So in order to get a near perfect sphere, you need to crank up the amount of segments, especially when you want to get really close to it. Next are these three material slots for the outer shell of the sphere and its inner part, as well as the glass section. So besides having less settings and no backside text, that's all about what differs from TextSphere. Well then, thanks for watching, and if you've got any questions or suggestions, feel free to contact me via c4dtools.net or ralf.brenninek@pixelasm.com, and take care.